Some people are born into privilege, others claw their way up from nothing. But what happens when a 14-year-old girl loses everything, her family, her home, her future, and still manages to become so lethal with a rifle that elite Navy SEALs stop their training just to watch her shoot? This isn't a fairy tale. This isn't Hollywood fiction. This is the story of Maya Rodriguez, a girl who went from sleeping in abandoned buildings to teaching America's deadliest warriors how to perfect their craft. A girl who turned her anger into precision, her pain into power, and her broken past into an unbreakable will. They say rock bottom becomes the solid foundation on which you rebuild your life. For Maya, rock bottom was just the beginning of a journey that would take her from the streets of Detroit to the most secretive military training facilities in the world. From a throwaway kid nobody wanted to, a woman whose name is whispered with respect in circles where respect is earned with blood, sweat, and perfect shots at impossible distances. This is her story. Raw, real, unfiltered. And it starts with a 14-year-old girl standing in the rain with everything she owned stuffed into a garbage bag, watching the only home she'd ever known disappear behind the flashing lights of police cars. The rain felt like tiny needles against Maya's face as she stood on the sidewalk, clutching a black garbage bag that held everything she owned in the world. 3 t-shirts, 2 pairs of jeans, some underwear, a toothbrush, and a small wooden box her grandmother had given her before she died. That was it. 14 years of life reduced to what could fit in a trash bag. Behind her, police officers were leading her foster father away in handcuffs. Again. This was the 3rd time in 2 years, but Maya knew it would be the last. She was too old now, too much trouble, too angry. The social workers had made that clear with their tired sighs and frustrated phone calls. Nobody wanted a teenage girl with an attitude problem and a file thicker than a phone book. Maya Rodriguez. The woman approaching her looked official, clipboard in hand, rain-soaked blazer hanging loose on her thin frame. I'm Janet Morrison from Child Protective Services. I know this is difficult, but we need to discuss your situation. Maya didn't look at her. She kept her eyes fixed on the police car pulling away, taking the last adult who had been responsible for her into the night. The flashing red and blue lights painted everything in alternating colors of emergency and chaos. This was her life now. Had always been her life, really. There's been some difficulty finding you another placement, Janet continued, her voice carefully neutral. Your age and history make it challenging. Most families prefer younger children. Maya finally turned to look at the woman. Janet was maybe 40, with kind eyes that had seen too much, and a mouth that had delivered too much bad news. She was trying to be gentle, but Maya could read between the lines. Nobody wanted her. She was damaged goods. What happens now? Maya asked, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. Inside, everything was crumbling, but years of moving from home to home had taught her to keep her emotions locked down tight. There's a group home about an hour from here. It's temporary, just until we can... No. The word came out harder than Maya intended. She'd been in group homes before. They were warehouses for unwanted kids, places where you learn to fight for everything or lose it all. Places where the staff counted down the minutes until their shifts ended and the older kids preyed on the younger ones. Janet's expression softened. Maya, I understand you're upset, but you're a minor. You don't have any other options right now. But Maya wasn't listening anymore. Her mind was racing, calculating. She'd turn 15 in 3 months. 3 years until she aged out of the system completely. 3 years of group homes and temporary placements and social workers who'd shuffle her from one bad situation to another. 3 years of being nobody's priority, nobody's responsibility, nobody's daughter. I'll run, she said quietly. Excuse me? If you try to put me in another home, another group facility, I'll run, and you'll never find me. Maya looked directly into Janet's eyes, and the social worker saw something there that made her step back slightly. This wasn't the desperate threat of a scared child. This was the calm promise of someone who had already made up their mind. They drove to the group home in silence, Maya's garbage bag on her lap, Janet occasionally glancing in the rearview mirror with worry. The Riverside Youth Center looked exactly like what it was. A converted office building, with bars on the windows and security cameras on every corner, the kind of place designed to keep people in, not to help them grow. The night supervisor, a tired-looking man named Carl, showed Maya to her room. It was barely larger than a closet, with 2 sets of bunk beds, a small dresser, and a window that faced a parking lot. 2 other girls were already there. Stephanie, 16 and pregnant, who barely looked up from her phone, And Kelly, 13 and so thin, she looked like a strong wind might blow her away. Lights out at 10, breakfast at 7, no exceptions. Carl recited the rules like he'd said them 1,000 times before. You'll meet with your caseworker on Thursday to discuss school enrollment. Any questions? Maya shook her head and tossed a garbage bag onto the bottom bunk that was apparently hers. Carl left, locking the door behind him. The sound of the lock clicking into place hit Maya like a physical blow. She was a prisoner now, just like she'd always been, moving from one cage to another. That first night, Maya lay awake listening to Stephanie's snoring and Kelly's quiet crying. Outside, she could hear the sounds of the city, sirens, car horns, voices raised in anger or laughter. Life going on without her, like it always had. She thought about her grandmother, the only person who had ever really loved her. Maria Rodriguez had been a tiny woman with hands that smelled like flour and vanilla, who had taught Maya to speak Spanish and cook tamales and believed that she was special, that she mattered. The cancer had taken her when Maya was 7, and everything good in Maya's life had died with her. After that came the foster homes. The Johnsons, who treated her like free labor and fed her table scraps. The Williamses, who locked her in her room for hours as punishment for the smallest infractions. The Hendersons, who seemed nice until Mr. Henderson started coming into her room at night. Maya had reported him, but by then she'd learned that telling the truth often made things worse, not better. Each placement had chipped away at her trust, her hope, her belief that adults could be counted on for anything. She'd learned to be self-sufficient, to expect nothing from anyone, to build walls so high that nobody could hurt her anymore. But those same walls that protected her also isolated her, made her seem difficult, unlovable, unreachable. The next morning, Maya sat in the cafeteria picking at a breakfast of powdered eggs and stale toast, watching the other residents. They were all broken in their own ways. Kids who'd been abused, abandoned, neglected, forgotten. Some had given up completely, their eyes flat and empty. Others were angry, ready to fight anyone who looked at them wrong. A few still had hope flickering in their eyes, but Maya knew that wouldn't last long. This place was where hope came to die. You're new. The voice belonged to Marcus, a boy about her age with scars on his arms and a way of standing that suggested he'd been in too many fights. Word of advice, stay out of Rodriguez's way. He gestured toward a larger boy across the room. He runs things here, and he doesn't like competition. Maya looked at the other Rodriguez and felt something cold settle in her stomach. He was maybe 17, built. Like he spent his days lifting weights, with tattoos creeping up his neck and dead eyes that missed nothing. When he looked at her, she saw recognition there, and something else. Interest. The predatory kind. Thanks for the warning, Maya said quietly. Marcus shrugged. Won't matter. Kid like you, pretty, new, alone? He'll come for you anyway. They always do. After breakfast, Maya was assigned to kitchen duty. She spent hours washing dishes and wiping down surfaces, grateful for work that kept her hands busy and her mind occupied. But even as she scrubbed pots and stacked plates, she was aware of eyes on her, of whispered conversations that stopped when she got too close. The confrontation came that evening. Maya was in her room trying to read a library book she'd found when Rodriguez and 2 of his friends appeared in her doorway. The night supervisor was nowhere to be seen. Heard we got fresh meat, Rodriguez said, leaning against the doorframe like he owned it. Which, Maya supposed he probably did. Time to explain how things work around here. Maya set down her book carefully, every muscle in her body coiled and ready. She'd been in this situation before, in different places with different predators, but the dance was always the same. They expected her to be scared, to submit, to become another victim in a place full of them. I'm listening, she said evenly. Rodriguez smiled, but there was nothing friendly about it. See, new girl, everything in this place belongs to me. The good food, the decent clothes, the protection from the staff who like to get handsy after lights out. And you. He looked her up and down like she was merchandise. You belong to me too now. Maya stood up slowly. She was tall for her age, but Rodriguez still had 6 inches and probably 60 pounds on her. His friends flanked him, blocking any escape route. In the other beds, Stephanie had turned up her music and Kelly was pretending to sleep. Nobody was going to help her. Nobody ever did. See, here's where you're wrong, Maya said, her voice quiet but carrying clearly in the small room. I don't belong to anybody. Not you, not the state, not the system that threw me away. I belong to me. Rodriguez's smile faded. That attitude is going to get you hurt, little girl. Maybe, Maya acknowledged, but you're going to get hurt first. What happened next was fast and brutal. Rodriguez lunged forward, expecting easy prey, but Maya had been fighting for survival since she was 7 years old. She grabbed the heavy ceramic mug from her bedside table and brought it down on his instep with all her strength. As he howled and doubled over, she drove her knee up into his face, feeling his nose crunch under the impact. His friends tried to grab her, but Maya was already moving. She'd learned long ago that when you're outnumbered and outweighed, you have to be faster, meaner, and willing to do whatever it takes to survive. She grabbed her reading lamp and swung it like a club, catching one boy across the temple and sending him stumbling backward. The second friend tried to tackle her, but Maya twisted away and drove her elbow into his solar plexus. As he gasped for breath, she grabbed the small wooden box her grandmother had given her and brought the corner down on his collarbone. The crack was audible. By the time security arrived, Rodriguez was on the ground holding his broken nose, blood seeping between his fingers, and his two friends were nursing their own injuries. Maya stood in the center of the room, breathing hard but uninjured, the wooden box still clutched in her hand. "What the hell happened here?" Carl demanded, looking between the injured boys and the girl who didn't have a scratch on her. "They fell," Maya said simply. Rodriguez glared at her through swelling eyes. "That little bitch attacked us. She's crazy." But Maya had learned long ago that the truth was less important than perception. She set down the wooden box carefully and straightened her shirt. "I was reading when these boys came into my room uninvited. When I asked them to leave, they became aggressive. I defended myself." Carl looked around the room, taking in the overturned furniture and the three boys who were clearly the worse for wear. "All three of them attacked you?" "Yes, sir." "And you fought them off by yourself?" "Yes, sir." There was something in Carl's expression that might have been respect. In a place like this, staff members saw a lot of victims, but they rarely saw someone who refused to become one. "Rodriguez, you and your boys get to the infirmary. And if I hear about any retaliation, you'll be transferred to juvie so fast your head will spin." After they left, Carl turned back to Maya. "You know you just made enemies of the toughest kids in this place." "I've had enemies before," Maya replied. "I'm still here." That night, word spread through the Riverside Youth Center like wildfire. The new girl had taken on Rodriguez and his crew and walked away without a scratch. Some of the residents looked at her with newfound respect. Others watched her with fear. But nobody bothered her again. Maya lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling and thinking about what came next. She'd won this battle, but the war was far from over. She had 3 years left in the system. 3 years of places like this and people like Rodriguez. 3 years of fighting for every scrap of dignity and respect. But as she drifted off to sleep, Maya made a promise to herself. She would not let this place break her. She would not become another casualty of a system that chewed up unwanted children and spit them out, broken and hopeless. She would survive, and she would find a way to become something more than just another statistic. She didn't know it yet, but that determination, that refusal to be beaten down, would become the foundation of everything she would eventually achieve. The girl who fought off 3 attackers with nothing but a ceramic mug and an unbreakable will would one day teach the world's most elite warriors about precision, focus, and the kind of mental toughness that can't be learned from textbooks. But first, she had to survive tomorrow. And the day after that. And all the days that followed until she could finally walk away from this life and build something better. The rain had stopped while she was thinking, and through her small window, Maya could see stars appearing in the clearing sky. Her grandmother had always said that stars were holes in the darkness, proof that light could exist even in the blackest night. Maya closed her eyes and held on to that thought, letting it carry her into an uneasy sleep, filled with dreams of distant targets and perfect shots that hadn't been fired yet. 3 months into her stay at Riverside Youth Center, Maya had established herself as someone not to be crossed. The incident with Rodriguez had marked her as dangerous, which in a place like this was both a curse and a blessing. Nobody tried to intimidate her anymore, but nobody tried to befriend her either. She existed in a bubble of solitary strength, respected but isolated, feared but alone. The routine was numbing in its predictability. Wake up at 6:30 to the sound of Carl banging on doors. Breakfast of whatever processed food the state contracted for cheapest. School classes taught by burned-out teachers who treated their students like criminals in training. Love all, trust a few, do wrong to none. Love all, trust a few, do wrong to none. Love all, trust a few, do wrong to none. Dinner, mandatory study hall. Lights out at 10. Repeat until you aged out or broke down, whichever came first. Maya threw herself into her studies with the same intensity she'd brought to defending herself that first night. Education was the only weapon they couldn't take away from her, the only path she could see that might lead somewhere better. While other residents skipped classes or slept through them, Maya absorbed everything: algebra, history, science, literature. She read voraciously, checking out the maximum number of books allowed from the local library and reading them by the dim light that filtered through her small window. It was during one of these late-night reading sessions that Maya first encountered the book that would change her life. One Shot, One Kill by Charles W. Sasser and Craig Roberts. She'd found it in a box of donated books, sandwiched between a romance novel and a cookbook. The cover showed a soldier with a rifle, and something about the serious expression on his face caught her attention. Maya had never been particularly interested in military stories, but as she began reading about Marine and Army snipers in Vietnam, something clicked into place. These weren't just soldiers. They were artists of precision, warriors who relied on patience, discipline, and absolute focus to accomplish their missions. They turned chaos into order through the simple act of perfect aim. The book talked about breathing control, about the mental discipline required to remain calm under extreme pressure, about the mathematical precision needed to calculate wind speed, distance, and trajectory. It described the almost zen-like state that snipers entered when everything else fell away except the target and the shot. Maya read the book 3 times in 2 weeks, memorizing passages and studying the technical diagrams. She began practicing the breathing exercises described in the text, learning to slow her heart rate and clear her mind of distractions. In the chaos of the group home, these moments of forced calm became her sanctuary. Mrs. Patterson, her caseworker, noticed the change during their weekly meetings. Maya had always been polite but distant, answering questions with the minimum required words and volunteering nothing. But now there was something different about her, a sense of purpose that hadn't been there before. "You seem more focused lately," Mrs. Patterson observed during one of their sessions in the cramped conference room that smelled of industrial disinfectant and broken dreams. Maya looked up from the book she'd been reading while they waited for Mrs. Patterson to finish her paperwork. "I've been thinking about the future." "Oh? What kind of future?" For the first time in months, Maya allowed herself to share something real. "I want to learn to shoot." Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows rose. "Shoot? Like hunting?" "Like precision shooting, long-range accuracy. I've been reading about it, and I think I might be good at it." The caseworker's expression grew concerned. "Maya, given your history with violence—" "This isn't about violence," Maya interrupted, her voice sharp with frustration. "It's about discipline, about control, about turning chaos into something precise and beautiful." Mrs. Patterson made a note in Maya's file. Probably something about the resident showing concerning interest in weapons. Maya immediately regretted opening up. She should have known better than to share her thoughts with someone whose job was to categorize and contain her. But the seed had been planted, and Maya couldn't stop thinking about it. She began researching shooting sports online during the limited computer time residents were allowed. She learned about competitive rifle shooting, about the Olympics, about civilian marksmanship programs. She discovered that shooting could be sport, art, meditation, all wrapped into one. The problem was access. Residents of Riverside weren't exactly encouraged to pursue hobbies involving firearms, and Maya had no money for equipment or instruction, even if such things had been allowed. She was stuck in a system designed to maintain the status quo, not to nurture unusual talents or ambitions. Everything changed on a Tuesday afternoon in late spring. Maya was walking back from the library when she noticed a commotion near the center's parking lot. A group of residents had gathered around someone, and even from a distance Maya could sense the tension in the air. As she got closer, she could see Rodriguez in the center of the crowd, his nose still slightly crooked from their encounter months earlier. He was facing off against a new resident, a boy who couldn't have been more than 12, holding a backpack protectively against his chest. "Come on, kid," Rodriguez was saying, his voice mock-friendly. "Just let us see what you got in there. We're just being neighborly." The boy shook his head, tears streaming down his face. "Please, it's all I have left. Please don't take it." Maya should have kept walking. She'd learned long ago not to get involved in other people's problems, that being a hero usually just made you a target. But something about the boy's voice, the pure desperation in it, reminded her of herself at that age. Reminded her of standing in the rain with everything she owned in a garbage bag. "Problem here?" Maya asked, stepping into the circle. Rodriguez's expression darkened when he saw her. Walk away, Rodriguez. This doesn't concern you. Funny thing about bullies, Maya said conversationally. They always think they're tougher than they really are, right up until someone proves them wrong. The crowd around them grew quiet, sensing that something significant was about to happen. Rodriguez had been building his reputation back up since their first encounter, and everyone knew he couldn't back down from this challenge without losing face completely. You got lucky last time, Rodriguez snarled. Caught me off guard. Let's see how you do in a fair fight. Maya looked at him calmly, her mind automatically cycling through the breathing exercises she'd been practicing. In through the nose for 4 counts, hold for 4, out through the mouth for 4. Her heart rate slowed, her vision sharpened, and everything except Rodriguez faded into background noise. You want to know the difference between you and me? She asked softly. You fight angry. I fight smart. Rodriguez charged, just like she knew he would. Bullies were predictable. They relied on intimidation and brute force because they'd never learned anything else. Maya sidestepped his rush and used his momentum against him, grabbing his arm and helping him continue his journey face first into the pavement. As he pushed himself up, blood streaming from his scraped face, Maya placed her foot carefully on his back, not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to pin him in place. Here's what's going to happen, she said, her voice carrying to every resident in the circle. You're going to leave the kid alone. You're going to find someone your own size to pick on. And you're going to remember that every time you think about being a predator, there's someone watching who's willing to be your predator instead.
She stepped back, allowing Rodriguez to get to his feet.
He looked around at the watching faces, saw the mixture of awe and amusement there, and seemed to deflate slightly. Without a word, he walked away, his friends trailing behind him like disappointed mourners. The crowd dispersed, but the new boy remained, clutching his backpack and staring up at Maya with something like worship in his eyes. Thank you, he whispered. Maya knelt down to his level. What's your name? Danny. Danny Martinez. Well, Danny Martinez, here's the thing about bullies. They're like hyenas. They only attack when they think you're weak and alone. Don't be weak, and don't be alone. Danny nodded eagerly, then hesitated. The thing in my backpack, it was my dad's. He died in Afghanistan, and it's all I have left of him. What is it? Danny looked around nervously, then partially unzipped his bag. Inside, Maya caught a glimpse of polished wood and metal. It's his service rifle. Not real, just a replica. But it looks exactly like the one he carried. My mum gave it to me before she couldn't take care of me anymore. Maya's breath caught in her throat. The rifle was beautiful, a perfect reproduction of an M24 sniper weapon system. Even as a replica, it was precisely crafted, with realistic weight and balance. Can I see it? Danny looked around again, then carefully pulled the rifle from his bag. Maya took it reverently, immediately noticing how perfectly it fit against her shoulder, how naturally her hands found the proper grip, how the sight picture aligned with her dominant eye. Your dad was a sniper? She asked. Yeah. Mom said he could hit anything from any distance. Said he saved a lot of lives by being so accurate. Danny's voice was full of pride and pain. I want to be like him when I grow up, but I don't know how to learn. Maya held the rifle a moment longer, feeling something she'd never experienced before. It was as if the weapon was made for her, as if she'd been born to hold it. When she reluctantly handed it back to Danny, she knew her life had just taken another turn. Danny, she said carefully, what would you say to learning together? From that day forward, Maya and Danny became an unlikely team. Danny had the equipment and the desire to honor his father's memory. Maya had the discipline and the driving need to excel at something, anything, that could give her life meaning and direction. They practiced in secret, using the abandoned warehouse behind the group home where the staff rarely ventured. Danny's replica rifle became their training tool, and Maya threw herself into mastering its use with the same intensity she brought to everything else. She studied ballistics with the dedication of a physicist, memorizing the mathematical formulas that governed bullet trajectory. She practiced breathing control for hours, learning to fire between heartbeats when her body was completely still. She worked on her trigger squeeze until she could break a shot without disturbing the rifle's aim by even a fraction of an inch. Danny, despite being younger, proved to have an intuitive understanding of the mechanics involved. His father had taught him the basics before deploying, and those early lessons had stuck. Together, they pushed each other to improve, turning their shared obsession into something approaching real skill. The breakthrough came 6 weeks into their clandestine training. Maya had been struggling with consistency, occasionally producing excellent shots but unable to repeat them reliably. Danny had noticed that she tensed up whenever she was about to fire, second-guessing herself at the crucial moment. "My dad used to say that shooting was like meditation," Danny told her as they set up their improvised range using empty cans and bottles they'd collected from the dumpster. "He said you had to become one with the rifle, to stop thinking and start feeling." "That sounds like mystical nonsense," Maya replied, but she was willing to try anything. "It's not about magic. It's about trust. Trusting your training, trusting your equipment, trusting yourself." Maya took her position behind the rifle, settling into the prone shooting stance they'd practiced hundreds of times. She controlled her breathing, aligned her sights on a can 50 yards away, and began her trigger squeeze. But instead of thinking about wind speed and bullet drop and all the technical aspects she'd memorized, she tried to simply trust. The shot surprised her with its perfection. The can exploded off its perch as if struck by lightning, and Maya found herself staring down the scope in amazement. "Again!" Danny said excitedly. The second shot was just as perfect, and the third, and the fourth. Maya had found her zone, that place of perfect calm and confidence that separated good shooters from great ones. Word of their activities inevitably reached the staff. Carl found them one evening as they were packing up their equipment, and Maya's heart sank as she prepared for punishment, confiscation, maybe even transfer to a more restrictive facility. But Carl surprised her. Instead of anger, his face showed something like curiosity. "How long you two been doing this?" he asked. Maya and Danny exchanged glances. There was no point in lying now. "About 2 months," Maya admitted. Carl picked up one of the cans they'd been using as targets, noting the precise hole punched through its center. "You do this?" "Yes, sir." He looked at her for a long moment, and Maya saw something in his expression she'd never seen directed at her before. Respect. Real respect. Not the fearful deference she'd earned through violence, but the kind that came from recognizing genuine talent. "My brother runs a shooting club downtown," Carl said finally. "Civilian marksmanship program. They teach kids proper safety, proper technique. You interested in doing this the right way instead of sneaking around back here?" Maya's world tilted on its axis. "You're not going to confiscate Danny's rifle. You're not going to punish us." Carl shrugged. "Rules say no weapons on the premises. That thing's not a weapon, it's a training aid, and I've been working with kids long enough to know the difference between destructive behavior and constructive passion." 3 days later, Maya found herself standing in a real shooting range for the first time in her life. The Golden Valley Rod and Gun Club was nothing fancy, just a long building with concrete walls and fluorescent lighting. But to Maya, it felt like stepping into a cathedral. Carl's brother Tom was a weathered man in his 50s who'd spent 20 years in the army before becoming a machinist. He took one look at Maya's stance with the rifle and raised an eyebrow. "You taught yourself to shoot?" "Yes, sir." "Huh." He adjusted her grip slightly, showed her a more stable shooting position, and pointed to a target 25 yards downrange. "Let's see what you can do." Maya's first shot at the range was slightly off-center, thrown by the unfamiliar surroundings and the pressure of being watched by someone who actually knew what he was doing. But her second shot was dead center, and her third, and her fourth. Tom walked down range to examine her target, then came back shaking his head. "Girl, I've been teaching shooting for 15 years, and I've never seen anyone pick it up this fast. You've got a natural gift." Over the following weeks, Maya threw herself into formal training with the same intensity she brought to everything else. Tom taught her proper safety protocols, advanced shooting positions, and the mental discipline required for competitive shooting. She learnt about different types of competitions, from local club matches to national championships. More importantly, she found a community. The other shooters at Golden Valley treated her as an equal, judging her solely on her ability to place shots accurately downrange. For the first time in years, Maya felt like she belonged somewhere. The transformation wasn't just technical, it was psychological. The girl who had fought her way through the foster care system with anger and defiance began to channel those same energies into precision and focus. The rage that had powered her survival became the determination that drove her excellence. Danny continued to train alongside her, but it quickly became clear that while he had decent fundamentals, Maya possessed something extraordinary: her ability to maintain perfect control under pressure, to shut out distractions and focus entirely on the target, set her apart from every other shooter Tom had ever coached. "It's not just talent," Tom told Carl one evening as they watched Maya practice. "It's like she needs this. Like shooting is the only thing that makes sense to her." And in many ways that was exactly right. For Maya, the rifle scope became a way of seeing the world clearly for the first time. Through the crosshairs, everything was simple, mathematical, perfect. There was no room for the chaos and unpredictability that had defined her life. There was only the target, the shot, and the satisfaction of absolute precision. 6 months after picking up her first rifle, Maya entered her first competition. The Tri-State Junior Championship drew young shooters from across the region, many of whom had been training since they were old enough to hold a rifle. Maya finished third overall and first in her age group. Standing on the podium, holding her trophy, Maya felt something she'd never experienced before: pride. Not the bitter satisfaction of defeating enemies or surviving another day, but the pure joy of excellence, achieved through dedication and skill. In the crowd watching the awards ceremony, Tom beamed like a proud father. Kyle nodded his approval. Danny cheered loud enough for the entire arena to hear. And somewhere in the back of her mind, Maya began to understand that this was just the beginning. She had found her calling, her path out of the system that had tried to define and contain her. She had found her way to transform everything that had been done to her into something she could do better than anyone else. The girl who had been thrown away by everyone who was supposed to care for her was becoming someone extraordinary. Someone who could turn empty cans into confetti from distances that made other shooters shake their heads in disbelief. Someone who was just beginning to understand how far her unusual gift might take her. Maya's life changed dramatically after that first competition victory. Word spread quickly through the shooting community about the teenage girl from the group home who could outshoot competitors with decades of experience. Suddenly, people who had never given her a second thought were paying attention. The first person to approach her was Elizabeth Hartwell, a former Olympic shooter turned coach who ran a prestigious training academy in Colorado Springs. Elizabeth had been at the Tri-State Championship scouting talent for her junior development program, and Maya's performance had caught her eye immediately. "I've been coaching for 30 years, Elizabeth told Maya and Tom during an impromptu meeting at the Golden Valley Range. "I've worked with Olympic medalists, world champions, and military elite, and I've never seen anyone with your combination of natural ability and mental discipline." Elizabeth was a small, intense woman in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that missed nothing. She spoke with the authority of someone who had spent her life pursuing perfection and teaching others to do the same. "I'd like to offer you a full scholarship to my academy," she continued. "Room, board, education, equipment, and the best coaching available anywhere in the world." Maya felt her heart stop. It was the opportunity of a lifetime, a chance to escape not just the group home but the entire system that had failed her. But years of disappointment had taught her to be suspicious of anything that seemed too good to be true. "What's the catch?" she asked. Elizabeth smiled, the first time Maya had seen her face soften. "No catch. Just hard work. The kind of training that will push you beyond any limit you think you have. The kind of dedication that will cost you everything else in your life except shooting." Maya looked at Tom, who nodded encouragingly. Then she looked at Danny, who was trying to hide his disappointment at the thought of losing his training partner. "When would I start?" Maya asked. "Next month, if you're ready." 3 weeks later, Maya found herself on a plane for the first time in her life, flying over mountains and prairies toward a new existence she could barely imagine. The academy was located on a sprawling ranch outside Colorado Springs, with multiple shooting ranges, a fully equipped gym, classrooms, and dormitories for the residential students. Maya's roommate was Sarah Chen, a 17-year-old from California whose parents had been grooming her for Olympic competition since she was 10. Sarah was everything Maya wasn't: polished, privileged, and possessed of the quiet confidence that came from never having to fight for anything in her life. "So you really learned to shoot in a group home?" Sarah asked during their first conversation, her tone suggesting she found the idea both fascinating and slightly appalling. "Among other things," Maya replied neutrally. Sarah clearly wanted to ask more questions, but something in Maya's expression warned her off. Maya had learned to recognize the look that people got when they heard about her background. A mixture of pity, curiosity, and superiority that made her want to demonstrate exactly how dangerous underestimating her could be. But at the academy, Maya quickly discovered that her background mattered less than her performance. Elizabeth ran the program like a military unit, with rigid schedules, exacting standards, and zero tolerance for excuses. Students were judged solely on their ability to put bullets exactly where they intended under any conditions Elizabeth could devise. The typical day began at 5:30 with physical training. Maya had always been naturally athletic, but the academy's conditioning program pushed her to new levels of strength and endurance. Running, weightlifting, yoga, and specialized exercises designed to improve shooting stability became as routine as breathing. After breakfast came technical training. Hours spent perfecting shooting positions, breathing techniques, trigger control, and mental preparation. Maya learnt about advanced ballistics, meteorology, and the dozens of variables that could affect a bullet's flight path. She studied competition rules and strategies with the same intensity she had once brought to survival. Afternoons were devoted to live fire practice. The academy had ranges that could simulate any condition a shooter might encounter: wind, rain, extreme temperatures, variable lighting, and moving targets. Elizabeth pushed her students to excel not just in perfect conditions but when everything was working against them. Maya thrived in this environment like a plant finally receiving proper sunlight. The structure and discipline that might have chafed against other teenagers felt like freedom to someone who had spent her life in chaos. Every challenge Elizabeth threw at her only made Maya more determined to excel. Within her first month at the academy, Maya was consistently outshooting students who had been training there for years. Her ability to maintain perfect focus under pressure, honed by years of navigating dangerous situations, gave her an advantage that technical training alone couldn't provide.
She doesn't just shoot, Elizabeth told her assistant coach during one of their weekly evaluation sessions.
She becomes the rifle. I've never seen anything like it. The breakthrough moment came during a particularly challenging exercise Elizabeth called stress inoculation. Students were required to complete a physically exhausting obstacle course, then immediately transition to shooting while their heart rates were elevated and their hands were shaking from exertion. Most shooters struggled to maintain accuracy under these conditions, their performance degrading significantly as their bodies fought against the demands of precision. But Maya seemed to thrive in the chaos, her shots actually becoming more accurate as the stress increased. "How do you do it?" Sarah asked after watching Maya place 10 consecutive shots in the 10 ring while still breathing hard from the obstacle course. Maya considered the question seriously. "I think about what real stress feels like," she said finally. "Wondering where you're going to sleep tonight, or whether someone's going to hurt you, or if anyone in the world actually cares whether you live or die. After that, everything else is just background noise." Sarah looked at her with something approaching awe. For the first time, Maya's background wasn't something to be pitied or curious about. It was an asset that none of her privileged competitors could replicate. As Maya's skills developed, Elizabeth began entering her in increasingly challenging competitions: regional championships, national qualifiers, international matches where she competed against shooters from around the world. Each victory built Maya's confidence and reputation within the shooting community. The media attention that followed was something Maya found harder to handle than any shooting challenge. Reporters wanted to tell her story, to focus on her dramatic rise from foster care to competitive shooting stardom. They painted her as an inspiration, a feel-good story about overcoming adversity through sport. Maya hated every minute of it. "I'm not a symbol," she told Elizabeth after a particularly intrusive interview, where the reporter had pressed for details about her time in various foster homes. "I'm not here to make people feel good about themselves for caring about disadvantaged kids." "Then what are you here for?" Elizabeth asked. Maya was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the question. "To be the best," she said finally. "To prove that all the people who gave up on me were wrong. To show that you can be broken and still be stronger than everyone else." Elizabeth nodded, understanding. "Then that's what we'll focus on. The shooting speaks for itself. Everything else is just noise." As Maya's junior career progressed, she began setting records that had stood for decades. Her ability to maintain perfect accuracy at extreme distances under adverse conditions became legendary within the shooting community. Other competitors studied her technique, trying to unlock the secret of her success. But Maya's true advantage wasn't technical. It was psychological. While other shooters crumbled under pressure, Maya seemed to gain strength from it. The bigger the stage, the more important the competition, the better she performed. "Pressure is just another variable," she explained to a group of younger students during the training seminar. "You learn to control your breathing, your trigger squeeze, your sight alignment. Controlling your mind is just another skill to master." By her 18th birthday, Maya had won 7 national championships in different disciplines and held multiple world records in her age group.
One day,
College recruiters were calling daily, offering full scholarships to prestigious universities with top-tier shooting programs. But Maya had her sights set on something different. She had been following the careers of military precision shooters, studying their techniques and achievements. The more she learned about the demands of tactical shooting, the more she was drawn to the challenge. "I want to enlist," she told Elizabeth one evening after a particularly successful training session. Elizabeth wasn't surprised. She had seen this coming for months, recognizing in Maya the same drive that had motivated her own transition from sport shooting to military service decades earlier.
You could have any college scholarship in the country, Elizabeth pointed out.
A full ride to your choice of universities, coaches fighting for the chance to work with you. College isn't going to teach me what I need to know, Maya replied. I want to test my skills in the real world, where missing doesn't just cost you points.
Elizabeth studied her former student carefully.
Maya had grown from the angry, defensive girl who had arrived at the academy into a confident young woman who understood exactly what she wanted and how to get it. The transformation had been remarkable to witness. If you're serious about this, I can make some calls, Elizabeth said. I know people who know people, the kind who might be interested in someone with your particular talents. 2 weeks later, Maya found herself sitting across from a Marine Corps recruiter who had driven all the way from Denver specifically to meet with her. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, no relation to her old nemesis from the group home, was a compact, serious man who had spent 2 tours in Afghanistan as a Marine sniper. Ms. Rodriguez, he began, consulting a file that seemed remarkably thick for someone who had never worn a uniform. I've reviewed your competition record, and I have to say it's impressive. But competitive shooting and combat shooting are very different animals. I understand that, Staff Sergeant. Do you? In competition, you get time to set up your shot, to control your breathing, to wait for perfect conditions. In combat, you might have seconds to engage a target that's shooting back at you. You might be cold, wet, scared, and running on no sleep for days. Maya met his gaze steadily. With respect, Staff Sergeant, I've been cold, scared, and unsure where my next meal was coming from for most of my life. I think I can handle a little discomfort. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez studied her for a moment, then smiled slightly. Fair enough, but there's something else you need to understand. The Marine Corps isn't just about individual excellence. It's about being part of something bigger than yourself, about having your fellow Marines' backs no matter what. I've never been part of anything before, Maya admitted, but I'd like to try. The conversation continued for another hour, covering everything from basic training expectations to the demands of sniper school. By the end, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez had made Maya an offer that would change her life completely. Here's what I can do for you, he said. You enlist, complete basic training, and Marine combat training, like every other Marine. If you prove you can handle the Corps, I'll recommend you for sniper training. But understand, having civilian shooting skills doesn't guarantee anything. You'll have to earn your place just like everyone else. Maya signed the papers that afternoon. 3 months later, she was at Marine Corps Recruit Depot, Paris Island, learning that everything she thought she knew about being tough was just the beginning. The drill instructors showed no interest in her competition record or her inspiring backstory. To them, she was just another recruit who needed to be broken down and rebuilt into a Marine. The physical demands of basic training were intense, but manageable for someone who had spent years in Elizabeth's conditioning program. The mental challenges were harder, learning to function as part of a team, to subjugate her individual goals to the good of the unit, to trust and be trusted by people she barely knew. But Maya discovered something unexpected during those grueling weeks at Paris Island. For the first time in her life, she was part of something that valued her not for what had been done to her or where she had come from, but for what she could contribute. The Marines didn't care that she had been a throwaway kid in the foster care system. They cared that she could shoot, that she was tough, that she wouldn't quit when things got difficult. Graduation day arrived on a sweltering South Carolina morning, with Maya's fellow Marines standing in perfect formation as they officially became Marines. Elizabeth had made the trip from Colorado to watch, beaming with pride as Maya received recognition for finishing first in her class in marksmanship. But the real test was still ahead. Sniper school at Camp Pendleton, where Maya would learn whether her civilian shooting skills could translate to the demands of military precision shooting, where she would discover if she had what it took to join the elite community of Marine Scout snipers. Standing at attention in her dress blues, Maya thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From a 14-year-old with everything she owned in a garbage bag to a Marine about to begin the most challenging training the Corps had to offer. The girl who had been expelled and abandoned was becoming someone that America's enemies would learn to fear. Someone whose name would be whispered with respect in the most exclusive military circles. Someone who would eventually teach Navy SEALs and Delta Force operators things about shooting they had never known. But first, she had to survive sniper school. And as Maya would soon discover, everything that had happened to her before was just preparation for the real test that lay ahead. The first thing Maya learned about Marine Corps Scout Sniper School was that her competition shooting record meant absolutely nothing. The second thing she learned was that the instructors took particular pleasure in humbling students who arrived with any hint of arrogance or expectation of special treatment. Rodriguez. Gunnery Sergeant Williams barked on her first day at Camp Pendleton. "I hear you think you can shoot." Maya stood at rigid attention. "I can shoot, Gunnery Sergeant. We'll see about that. Drop and give me 50. Maya hit the deck and began cranking out push-ups while Gunny Williams continued his welcome speech to the class. 23 Marines had been selected for this course, all of them top performers from their respective units. By graduation, fewer than half would remain. "Ladies and gentlemen," Williams announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had earned 3 Purple Hearts and 2 Bronze Stars across multiple deployments. "For the next 12 weeks, you belong to me. I will push you harder than you have ever been pushed. I will ask you to do things that seem impossible, and most of you will fail." Maya finished her push-ups and resumed her position in formation, sweat already beading on her forehead despite the cool morning air. Around her, she could see the other students sizing each other up, trying to identify the competition and the weak links. The student to her left was Corporal Jackson, a farm kid from Iowa who had grown up hunting and could reportedly drop a deer at 400 yards with iron sights. To her right was Lance Corporal Patel, an urban kid from Chicago who had discovered his shooting talent in the Marines and worked his way up through sheer determination. What none of them knew yet was that Scout Sniper School wasn't really about shooting. The marksmanship component, while demanding, was just one part of a much larger puzzle. The real challenge was learning to be invisible, to move through hostile territory undetected, to survive for days or weeks behind enemy lines with nothing but what they could carry. The academic portion of the course was more intense than anything Maya had experienced at the shooting academy. Students learned advanced ballistics, meteorology, range estimation, camouflage and concealment, stalking techniques, observation and reporting procedures, and mission planning. Every test was graded on a pass-fail basis, with no room for partial credit. Maya threw herself into the coursework with typical intensity, studying late into the night while other students struggled to keep up. But she quickly discovered that knowledge alone wasn't enough. The instructors weren't just teaching information. They were building judgment, intuition, and the kind of fieldcraft that could only be developed through extensive practice. The first major hurdle was the stalking phase. Students were required to move undetected across varied terrain, while instructors with high-powered optics tried to spot them. Being seen meant automatic failure and dismissal from the course. Maya's first stalking exercise was a disaster. Despite her camouflage and careful movement, she was spotted within the first hour by an instructor she never even saw. The humiliation of being walked off the range while other students continued their approaches was almost unbearable. "What did you do wrong?" Gunny Williams asked during her after-action review. Maya had spent hours analyzing her failure. "I moved too fast. I was thinking like a competitive shooter instead of like a hunter. I forgot that the goal isn't just to reach the target, but to remain invisible while doing it." Williams nodded. "Competition shooting is about perfect shots under controlled conditions. Sniping is about perfect shots when everything is trying to kill you, and you can't let anyone know you exist. Different skill set, Rodriguez. Figure it out or go home." Maya didn't go home. Instead, she began studying the instructors themselves, watching how they moved, how they positioned themselves, how they seemed to become part of the landscape. She practiced her camouflage techniques obsessively, learning to break up her human outline and blend with different types of terrain. Slowly, her stalking improved. She began making it further before being detected, then managed her first successful approach. During her 7th attempt, the satisfaction of remaining undetected while delivering a perfect shot was unlike anything she had experienced in competition. But the physical demands of the course were unlike anything Maya had experienced. Students regularly carried 70-pound packs across miles of rough terrain, often in full ghillie suits that added another 20 pounds and made every movement more difficult. They practiced moving through swamps, across desert, up mountainsides and through dense forest, all while maintaining absolute silence and avoiding detection. The sleep deprivation was worse than the physical exertion. Students were regularly awakened for night exercises, emergency drills, and surprise inspections. They learned to function effectively on 3 or 4 hours of sleep, to remain alert during long observation periods, and to make life and death decisions while mentally and physically exhausted. Maya's breaking point came during the 4th week of the course. The class was conducting a multi-day field exercise in the mountains, with students required to establish observation posts and report on simulated enemy activity. Maya had been awake for 36 hours, was soaked through from a cold rain that hadn't stopped in 2 days, and was fighting a fever that made everything feel surreal. She was lying prone behind her rifle, trying to identify targets through her scope while fighting to keep her eyes open, when she simply couldn't continue. Her vision blurred, her hands began shaking, and she felt herself starting to lose consciousness. "Can't do it," she whispered to her spotter, Corporal Jackson. "I think I'm done." Jackson looked at her with concern. Maya had been one of the strongest performers in the class, and seeing her break was alarming. But instead of calling for an instructor, he did something that surprised her. "My dad used to say that when you think you can't go on, you're only 40% done," Jackson said quietly. "That the body always quits before the mind has to." "I can't see straight," Maya replied. "Then don't see. Feel. You've been shooting so long it's muscle memory. Trust your training and take the shot." Maya closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself the way she had learned years ago in the group home. She thought about Danny, about Elizabeth, about all the people who had believed in her when she couldn't believe in herself. She thought about the scared 14-year-old girl standing in the rain and how far she had come from that moment. When she opened her eyes and looked through her scope, the target seemed to jump into crystal clarity. She controlled her breathing, felt the natural point of aim, and broke the shot with perfect timing. Even through the fever and exhaustion, the bullet went exactly where she intended. "Outstanding shot," Jackson whispered. "See? You had it in you the whole time." That moment became a turning point for Maya. She realized that Scout Sniper School wasn't just about building technical skills. It was about discovering reserves of mental and physical toughness that went beyond anything she had previously imagined. It was about learning that the human body and mind could endure far more than seemed possible. As the weeks progressed, the class continued to shrink. Students dropped out due to injuries, academic failures, or simple inability to meet the unrelenting standards. Maya watched good Marines pack their gear and leave. Their dreams of becoming scout snipers ended by the demands of the course. But Maya not only survived, she began to excel. Her competition shooting background finally became an asset during the advanced marksmanship phases, where students were required to engage targets at extreme ranges under challenging conditions. Her years of mental conditioning helped her remain calm during high-stress scenarios when other students cracked under pressure. The final exercise of the course was designed to test everything students had learned over the previous 12 weeks. Working in two-person teams, they were inserted into a large training area and required to move undetected to designated positions, establish observation posts, and engage specific targets while avoiding simulated enemy patrols. Maya was paired with Jackson, and their rapport had grown strong through months of shared hardship. They moved through the training area like ghosts, using every concealment technique they had learned to avoid detection while closing on their targets. The final shot was at a distance that would have been challenging even on a competition range with perfect conditions. Through her scope, Maya could see the target at nearly 800 meters, heat shimmer rising from the ground between her position and the objective. Wind was gusting unpredictably, and she had only one chance to make the shot count. Maya went through her mental checklist automatically. Range estimation, wind reading, breathing control, natural point of aim. Everything she had learned from Elizabeth, from Tom at the Golden Valley Range, from the Marine instructors who had pushed her beyond her perceived limits. All of it came together in this single moment. The shot was perfect. Even the instructors, who were notoriously stingy with praise, acknowledged the quality of the shot in their after-action review. Graduation from Scout Sniper School was held on a sunny California morning, with Maya's class of survivors standing in formation as they received their Scout Sniper insignia. Only 11 Marines had completed the course, and Maya had finished first in her class in overall performance. Elizabeth had flown in from Colorado for the ceremony, beaming with pride as Maya received recognition for her achievement. Also present was Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, the recruiter who had first convinced her to enlist and who had followed her career with interest. But the person Maya thought about most during the ceremony was Danny Martinez, the scared 12-year-old boy who had shared his father's replica rifle with her in an abandoned warehouse behind a group home. Danny was serving his own tour in the Marine Corps now, assigned to an infantry unit preparing for deployment. Maya's success had inspired him to enlist as soon as he aged out of the system. After the ceremony, Maya was approached by a man in civilian clothes who introduced himself as Colonel Robert Hayes, Marine Corps Special Operations Command. Colonel Hayes had been following Maya's progress through the sniper course with interest. And he had a proposition. Marine Corps Special Operations is always looking for exceptional talent, he told Maya during their private conversation. Your performance at sniper school, combined with your competition background, makes you exactly the kind of asset we need for some very specialized missions. Maya listened carefully as Colonel Hayes outlined the opportunities available within MARSOC. Advanced training, cutting-edge equipment, and missions that would test her skills in ways that conventional military operations never could. But Colonel Hayes also mentioned something else that caught Maya's attention. We frequently work with other special operations units. Navy SEALs, Army Special Forces, Delta Force. Cross-training opportunities where the best operators from different services share knowledge and techniques. What kind of cross-training? Maya asked. Everything from advanced shooting techniques to specialized mission planning. The goal is to ensure that American Special Operations Forces are the best in the world at what they do, regardless of which service they come from. Maya realized that this was the path toward the opportunity she had been unconsciously seeking since she first picked up a rifle. Not just to be an excellent shooter, but to be someone who could teach excellence to others. To take everything she had learned and use it to make the warriors who defended her country even more effective. I'm interested, sir, she said. 6 months later, Maya found herself at Camp Lejeune, beginning the grueling selection process for Marine Corps Special Operations. The challenges were even more intense than Scout Sniper School, designed to identify Marines who could function effectively in the most demanding operational environments imaginable. But Maya was no longer the angry, defensive girl who had fought her way through the foster care system. She wasn't even the talented competition shooter who had arrived at basic training with something to prove. She was becoming something new. A warrior who combined technical excellence with the mental toughness that came from surviving everything life had thrown at her. As she progressed through MARSOC training, Maya began developing the reputation that would eventually make her legendary within the special operations community. Her ability to make impossible shots under the worst possible conditions became the stuff of training lore. Her mental composure under pressure inspired other operators to push their own limits. And slowly, word began to spread through the tight-knit community of America's elite warriors about a young Marine who could teach them things about precision shooting they had never known. About a woman who had turned a childhood of abandonment and abuse into an unbreakable will to excel. The girl who had been expelled and thrown away was becoming someone that the most elite warriors in the world would seek out for training. Someone whose skills were so exceptional that Navy SEALs would stop their own exercises just to watch her work. But Maya didn't know that yet. For now, she was focused on the next challenge, the next test, the next opportunity to prove that she belonged among America's finest. The scared 14-year-old in the rain was gone forever, replaced by someone who could turn chaos into precision with nothing more than steady hands and an unbreakable spirit. Staff Sergeant Maya Rodriguez adjusted her scope for the 5th time in as many minutes, not because the adjustment was necessary, but because the Navy SEALs watching her were making her slightly nervous. Not nervous about the shot. Maya had never been nervous about a shot, but nervous about the expectations. It was her 3rd year with Marine Corps Special Operations, and her reputation within the Special Operations community had grown beyond anything she could have imagined. Word had spread through the tight-knit network of America's elite warriors about the Marine sniper who could make shots that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Today, she was at the Naval Special Warfare Training Facility in Coronado, conducting what the brass called cross-training opportunities, and what the operators called watching Rodriguez do impossible things with a rifle. The target was a playing card, the ace of spades, placed edge-on at 1,200 meters. The wind was gusting unpredictably off the Pacific Ocean, shifting direction and velocity every few seconds. Most snipers would consider this shot challenging under perfect conditions. In the current weather, it bordered on impossible. Maya had volunteered for the demonstration after overhearing several SEALs discussing long-range shooting limitations during the morning briefing. The conversation had started academically, with operators sharing stories of difficult shots they had made or missed during various deployments, but it had gradually devolved into skepticism about whether anyone could consistently perform at the distances and accuracy levels that were becoming necessary in modern warfare. I hear MARSOC has someone who thinks she can shoot, one of the SEALs had said, his tone suggesting polite disbelief. Maybe we should see what all the fuss is about. Commander Peterson, who was overseeing the inter-service training program, had looked directly at Maya. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, would you be interested in giving our SEAL friends a demonstration? Now, 3 hours later, Maya found herself behind her custom-built rifle system with a dozen of America's most elite warriors watching every move. She had long since learned that demonstrations like this weren't really about the shooting. They were about credibility, respect, and earning the right to teach techniques that might save lives in combat. Maya settled into her shooting position, feeling the familiar sense of calm that always came when she was behind a rifle. The weapon was an extension of herself now, custom-built to her exact specifications, and tuned to perfection through thousands of hours of practice. Every component had been selected or modified to maximize accuracy and reliability under any conditions she might encounter. Through her scope, the playing card appeared as a thin vertical line, wavering slightly in the heat shimmer rising from the intervening ground. Maya began her shooting sequence automatically, controlling her breathing and feeling for the rifle's natural point of aim. But more importantly, she was reading the wind. Wind was the enemy of long-range precision shooting, and the conditions today were particularly challenging. Maya watched the vegetation between her position and the target, noting how grass moved differently at various distances, indicating changes in wind speed and direction along the bullet's flight path. She observed dust patterns, heat shimmer distortion, and the movement of a small flag placed halfway to the target. "That's an impossible shot in this wind," one of the SEALs murmured to his teammate, apparently forgetting that Maya could hear everything through her earpiece. Maya allowed herself a small smile. Impossible was a word that had lost meaning for her years ago. Everything worthwhile in her life had once seemed impossible. Surviving the foster care system, succeeding in competitive shooting, graduating from sniper school, earning her place in special operations. Impossible was just another variable to be managed. She calculated the wind holds for different portions of the bullet's flight path, making mental adjustments for the varying conditions she had observed. This wasn't the kind of mathematical precision they taught in shooting schools. This was intuitive understanding, developed through years of observation and thousands of shots fired under similar conditions. Maya controlled her breathing, feeling her heart rate slow as she entered the zone that had become as familiar as her own name. The background noise of observers, wind, and distant training exercises faded into silence. Her world contracted to nothing but the target, the crosshairs, and the perfect moment when everything aligned. The shot surprised even her with its perfection. Through her scope, Maya watched the playing card disintegrate into confetti that scattered in the wind. For a moment, there was complete silence from the observation area. "Holy shit," someone whispered, apparently forgetting radio protocol. Commander Peterson's voice came through everyone's earpieces. "Outstanding shot, Staff Sergeant. I think our guests are appropriately impressed." As Maya began breaking down her rifle system, the SEALs approached with expressions that ranged from amazement to professional skepticism. She had seen this reaction before. Elite operators didn't impress easily, and when they encountered something that challenged their understanding of what was possible, they wanted to understand how it worked. "How?" asked Chief Petty Officer Williams, a grizzled veteran with multiple deployment patches and the 1,000-yard stare of someone who had seen too much combat. "I've been shooting for 20 years, and I wouldn't even attempt that shot in these conditions."
Maya finished securing her rifle and turned to face the group. "It's not magic," she said simply.
"It's pattern recognition, environmental awareness, and accepting that perfect conditions don't exist in the real world." Over the next hour, Maya found herself conducting an impromptu seminar on advanced long-range shooting techniques. The SEALs listened with the focused attention of professionals who understood that new knowledge could be the difference between mission success and failure, between coming home and becoming another name on the memorial wall. She explained her wind reading techniques, demonstrating how to identify microclimates along the bullet's flight path. She discussed the psychological aspects of extreme long-range shooting, the mental discipline required to remain calm when lives depended on perfect execution. Most importantly, she talked about practice methodologies that could help operators develop reliable accuracy at distances that had previously been considered beyond practical combat ranges. "The military teaches you to shoot out to 800 meters, maybe 1,000 in perfect conditions," Maya told the attentive audience. "But modern warfare is pushing engagements out further. Enemy snipers are engaging our troops at 1,200 to 1,500 meters, sometimes beyond that. We need to be able to respond at those distances consistently and reliably." Lieutenant Commander Roberts, the senior SEAL present, was taking notes. "What kind of training regimen would you recommend for developing these capabilities?" Maya thought carefully before answering. "Traditional military marksmanship training is excellent for building fundamentals, but it's designed around standardized conditions and equipment. Real-world precision shooting requires individual customization and scenario-based training that simulates actual combat conditions." What followed was a detailed discussion of advanced training methodologies, equipment optimization, and the mental conditioning required for consistent performance under extreme pressure. Maya found herself drawing on everything she had learned from Elizabeth at the academy, from her Marine instructors, and from her own experiences in special operations. The conversation continued through lunch and into the afternoon practical exercises. Maya worked individually with several operators, analyzing their shooting techniques and suggesting modifications that could improve their long-range performance. She demonstrated alternative shooting positions, breathing techniques, and mental preparation methods that could be adapted to different tactical situations. Word of the demonstration spread quickly through the special operations community. Within weeks, Maya was receiving requests for training from units across all services. Delta Force operators wanted to learn her wind reading techniques. Army Rangers requested instruction in extreme long-range shot placement. Air Force Special Operations sought her expertise in unconventional shooting positions. The requests eventually reached the attention of senior leadership at Special Operations Command, who recognized the strategic value of having an instructor capable of raising the precision shooting capabilities of America's elite forces. Maya was offered a position with the Joint Special Operations Command Training Directorate, with a mandate to develop advanced marksmanship curricula for all Special Operations forces. The assignment took Maya to locations across the United States and around the world, working with different units to enhance their long-range precision capabilities. She taught Navy SEALs in Virginia, Army Special Forces in North Carolina, and Marine Raiders in California. Each group presented unique challenges and learning opportunities. But the most satisfying aspect of her new role wasn't the technical instruction or the professional recognition. It was seeing the moment when students made the mental breakthrough that transformed them from good shooters into exceptional ones. Maya recognized that expression of sudden understanding because she had worn it herself years ago when she first discovered her gift for precision shooting. During a training evolution with a Navy SEAL team at their facility in Virginia Beach, Maya was working with a young operator who was struggling with consistency at extreme ranges. Petty Officer Second Class Martinez reminded her of herself at that age, technically proficient but lacking the mental discipline required for reliable performance under stress. "You're overthinking it," Maya told him as they reviewed his shot group during a training break. "You know the mechanics, you understand the ballistics. Trust your training and let the shot surprise you." "Easy for you to say," Martinez replied with frustration. "You make it look effortless." Maya looked at the young SEAL carefully, seeing something of her younger self in his determination and frustration. "Let me tell you something about effortless," she said. "When I was your age, I was living in a group home, getting into fights just to survive each day. I learned to shoot because it was the only thing that made sense in a world that had gone completely insane." She paused, watching his expression change as he processed this unexpected information. "Every shot I make carries the weight of every person who believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself," Maya continued. "Every shot is proof that you can be broken and still be stronger than everyone else. It's not effortless, it's inevitable." Something clicked in Martinez's understanding. His next shot group was the tightest he had ever fired at that distance, and his performance remained consistently excellent throughout the rest of the training evolution. Later that evening, as Maya was cleaning her rifle in the armory, she was approached by Senior Chief Johnson, the most experienced operator in the SEAL team, and someone whose respect had to be earned through demonstrated competence. "Staff Sergeant," Johnson said, "I've been in the teams for 15 years. I've worked with some outstanding shooters, including former Olympic competitors, and guys with decades of competition experience. But I've never seen anyone combine technical skill with teaching ability the way you do. Thank you, Senior Chief." "That's not what I came to say," Johnson continued. "What I want to know is how someone with your background ended up where you are today. Because the young operators need to understand that excellence isn't about privilege or natural talent. It's about something deeper than that." Maya considered his request carefully. She had always been reluctant to discuss her background, preferring to let her performance speak for itself. But she was beginning to understand that her story might be as valuable as her technical instruction. "Senior Chief," she said finally, "if you think it would help them, I'm willing to share." The next morning, Maya found herself standing before the assembled SEAL team, preparing to tell her story in detail for the first time since enlisting. She talked about the group home, about learning to shoot with Danny's replica rifle, about the competition career that had given her hope for the first time in her life. She described the challenges of military training, the demands of special operations, and the long journey from